Welcome to the 2020 Bronx Book Festival. You're listening to Kissing Under New York City Stars. Our moderator is Norma Perez-Hernandez. Norma is an assistant editor at Kensington Publishing Corp. She has worked on a variety of projects, including fiction, romance, mysteries, thrillers, and nonfiction. Norma studied English literature at the Macaulay Honors College at the City College of New York and is a graduate of the Publishing Certificate Program at City College, where she became the inaugural recipient of the Women's Media Group Fellowship. A New York City native from the Bronx, Norma is thrilled to build a list with diverse authors and books. Norma, the stage is yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to see you all here and to introduce these incredible authors. Ruby Lang is the author of the acclaimed Practice Perfect series. Her alter ego, Mindy Hung, wrote about romance novels, among other things, for The Toast. Her work has also appeared in the New York Times, The Walrus, Bitch, and other fine venues. She enjoys running slowly, reading quickly, and ice cream at any speed. She lives in New York with a small child and a medium-sized husband. Quanah Jackson is a USA Today best-selling author and native New Yorker. After spending more than 10 years designing women's sportswear for various fashion houses, Quanah took a leap of faith and decided to pursue her next dream of being a writer. She is the mother of twins and currently lives in a suburb of New York with her husband. Learn more at kmjackson.com. Best-selling author Kate Clayborn is a writer and lifelong student and current teacher of literature of all sorts. She is the author of the Chance of a Lifetime series and of the rom-com Love Lettering. While she loves New York City, she originally hails from Ohio and currently lives in Richmond, Virginia. Usually you can find her writing, reading, or celebrating her avid enthusiasm for sarcasm over on Twitter. Zoraida Cordova is the author of many young adult fantasy novels, including Incendiary, Star Wars: A Crash of Fate, the Brooklyn Brujas series, and the Vicious Deep trilogy. Her novel Labyrinth Lost won the International Latino Book Award for Best Young Adult Novel in 2017. Her short fiction has appeared in the New York Times bestselling anthology Star Wars from a Certain Point of View, Toil and Trouble, 15 Tales of Women and Witchcraft, and Come On In. She is the co-editor of the anthology Vampires Never Get Old. Her debut middle-grade fantasy, The Way to Rio Luna, will be published summer 2020 from Scholastic. She writes not romance novels as Zoey Castile. Zoraida was born in Ecuador and raised in Queens, New York. When she isn't working on her next novel, she is planning a new adventure. All right, let's get started. So, what inspired all of you to write about New York City in your romances? In other words, what makes New York City romantic to you?
Somebody has to kick it off.
This is the one for anybody.
Well, I live in New York City, and something that I do a lot is I walk around, or I used to at least. Yes. And I listen to a lot of conversations. And at a certain point, I just wanted to get all of this wonderful stuff down on the page. And I also just wanted to show a New York that was a little bit more like the one that I knew. And it is beautiful and romantic. And also it's one that sometimes we don't necessarily get. In the books about this city. There are so many books about this city, and there are so many different corners, and there's so much to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm from Queens, New York. So I think every borough has its own individual sounds and smells, and every part of New York is unique. And even within the boroughs, you have specific neighborhoods. I think that a while ago there was like a complaint about how every romance book takes place in New York, or every romance rom-com movie takes place in New York, and it's like a trope. And I'm like, it's not a trope to those of us who live here and who like have to make New York a setting that feels real, because you can tell the difference when you read a book, any book, a romance book by somebody who loves New York and somebody who lives in New York versus somebody who's like never even been here. And the difference is very telling. And so for me, it's like New York is it's not just the romanticism of being in a city that so many people, they want to take something from New York, right? Like surviving, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. I feel like people come here, have this idea that they're going to come here and get something. They're going to get a job, a boyfriend, a husband, or whatever. And they're going to like change their lives by taking something from New York, but they never ask themselves, like, what am I giving to New York? Right. And I think that's the biggest difference between those kinds of books and those kinds of people. And setting something in New York it's just a matter of loving the place that it is for me.
I agree. I couldn't imagine not writing about New York or not having New York be a part of my writing.
Yeah.
I was born in Midtown Manhattan in the old Roosevelt Hospital. So right in the center of New York. I was raised in Harlem. So you're making a face, Norma. You're like, wow, that place isn't even there anymore. She's so old. It's like,
no, it's really, you know, like when it's like real New Yorker, when you're recently my fiance, I'm have to bring it back to COVID, went to go get COVID testing at this place in the Bronx, and I called my dad about it, and he was like, I remember when that place was being built. It's just so like, yeah.
It's true. It's very true. I'm very much like, you know, I'm like, no, it's the Triborough Bridge. No, it's the Tappan Zee Bridge.
I don't
It's the Van Wyck.
I don't know.
I know it's the 59th Street Bridge. I'm like, you will never take the 59th Street Bridge away from me.
There's certain things you will not take away. It's like, yes, I love Cuomo with all my heart. And it's like, I understand why he renamed the bridge, but he will understand me when I'll forever call it the Tappan Zee. It's just, it is what it is. You know, so it's the whole, I feel like I always say to people, it's like, I bleed New York. It's like, you cut me, I bleed New York. It's like, I love New York is not just a saying. It's like, it's a part of, you know, the way my heart beats. And it's the place where I first fell in love. And first, even though I married someone from Georgia, but he he says he's a New Yorker. I'm like, no, you're not, honey. Don't get beside yourself. But it's like where you had your first crush, you know what I mean? New Yorkers might have fell in love and had their first crush or kiss on a rooftop. You know, it's a different sort of feeling, different sort of vibe, you know, and that's it's something that I hope to get across in my writings, that sort of, you know, feelings of seeing a guy who looks cute in a deli, and that you just, you know, New Yorkers will understand, and I'd like to learn and try to get across in my work. So that's what I consider romantic about New York, not just, you know, the tall buildings and, you know, Times Square and things like that. It's a small, like Zoey is saying, the little neighborhoods, those little quiet spots that might seem very foreign to other people, they're like home to us. And yeah.
So I know I'm the outlier here because I'm not from New York.
Okay, so I'm not from New York,
but you love it.
I do. I
love
really,
it. Yes.
New York is a really special place to me, and I really love it. And when I decided to write about a book set in New York, where New York is a really important character, I guess I think I love New York so much that I know that I would never dare to write as though I was from there. And so I wrote about two people who fall in love, who are not native New Yorkers, but who are there, who live and work there now. And their relationship to the city is different because they are not native to the city. So I guess I tried to write about the experience of trying to kind of organize your knowledge of a place like New York when you are not from there, when you don't kind of know it in your bones. And I think that I think it was a really interesting experience to put myself in the heads of these characters, because I think when you move someplace new, as I have done in my life, you have to work to like figure out a pattern to live by in that new place, because you don't quite know it as well as you would if you were born there and raised there. So I wrote a book about people who know the city in different ways. One of my characters really knows the city from walking it and looking at the signs in the city. And the other character kind of knows it by his favorite places to eat. And so I think those are things I love about New York. And so it was fun to think about how to incorporate them in a love story. And I think when you fall in love in a place, I think the place is part of the fabric of the love story. And so I really loved writing about it. I was honored to write about it, and I hope I did right by it, is what I would say.
You know, Kate, I am going to be biased. I backread it, for your editor at Kensington. And, as a native New Yorker, someone who's born and raised even from the Bronx, like the poorest borough in New York City, I've gotten, much like a lot of the panelists here, this unease sometimes with the homogeny of your typical New York City set story, whether it is in film or TV or in books. And I was so, sometimes you can get a little apprehensive. Like, is this just like, am I going to feel welcome? Is this going to feel like similar to a home that I do know or a place that I do live and work in? And I did get that sense very strongly. And I was actually interested in knowing, that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask both you and all the other authors here, how, whether your research, did any of you, even native New Yorkers, had to do any research doing your work for any of your fiction? Or, was it like did lived experience play into the settings or characters in any of your books?
So for my book, the 3 books that are included in the Uptown collection, Playing House, Open House, and House Rules, a lot of it is about the architecture of the city, and about the ways that we live here. A lot of it's about real estate. Like the first book is about a couple who walk through the Mount Morris Historic District, which is, around the 120s in the middle of Harlem, central Harlem. And I did research just to know about the houses. I did research on Forest Hills, Queens, which is another setting, because it's one of the first planned communities. This is like nerdy stuff. I learned about a lot of nerdy stuff, basically. And some of the detail got in, and it's amazing how a lot of the ways that we've built up the city have just changed the population, and how people, how that has affected like who lives in which areas. And and another thing that I wrote about was gentrification. And so, it's really been fascinating to just learn and see who's been moving where. And, when people move different places, they also get to meet and they also get to fall in love. That's another thing. I'm not saying that it's necessarily great that, gentrification is happening, but, it's a complicated thing. And also these things, that make some drama and conflict and sometimes love. So it was really fun just to learn about just the different layers of history too. So
I think that go ahead.
Oh, please.
No, I was gonna say that I don't do research when I write about the neighborhoods in my books. For New York, I mean, when I wrote my very first romance, Luck on the Line, I definitely went to Boston. I've been to Boston several times, and I spent a lot of time there. And it is about a New York girl who goes to Boston for a restaurant opening. and so I spent a lot of time in those neighborhoods. So like if I'm going to write about a real place that exists as opposed to my fantasy novels, I do try to do my due diligence and like learning about the specific neighborhood's history, who lives there, like Ruby said. But in New York, I think like my book Stripped took place in Astoria, and my other romance novel set in New York, Love on the Ledge, it takes place in Nassau County in West Hampton. So those are places that I'm very familiar with. I think that when I write about Queens, I stick to the areas that I'm familiar with, because it doesn't always, unless I'm writing specifically about community, I Googled, the train locations that I no longer remember, because I used to live in Astoria, and I set Stripped on my street that I used to live in. So I very much, know the restaurant that I changed the name of the restaurant, but like, it's very much this one restaurant. And it's very much the school that was in my neighborhood. So that I fictionalized, but I still knew it, right? I like knew it in my bones. And I think that was really important for me to keep that. But I agree with what you said, Ruby, like the way that the city has been laid out, the way that, the trains end at certain areas, of New York for a reason, and how like that excluded people of color for so long from moving into certain areas of New York and Long Island specifically. So it's fascinating to think about the lines of New York, since we're so diverse and et cetera, but it's also been very planned and exclusive in many other ways.
When I was reading / listening to Real Men Knit, that was like one of the things, and you definitely get the sense of gentrification in all of your books, actually. Yeah. But like in terms of like a conflict, very strongly in Real Men Knit, because there's a shop at stake. I was wondering if you could speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, I did my research very, very, not a lot of research, but somewhat very much like Ruby did, and it was really upsetting for me because I really saw the shop in my head for strong knits. Like I knew exactly where I wanted to put it. I could see from where I grew up and where I still have lots of friends and family there, and where we used to have block parties, where I wanted it. And research wise, I just, sort of, took a drive where I wanted it, took pictures of where I would have placed my fictional shop, and said, oh, this cool coffee shop that's here now, where the coffee shop wouldn't have been when I was growing up. And I was like, that could make a great knitting shop, and sort of said this would be the downstairs, this would be where they lived, and things like that. But to see how the landscape has changed in such a short amount of time, I mean, such a very few years, and the gentrification that has gone on now, was really sort of devastating to me, just devastating. Like, as people of color, we make light of certain things just because they're so painful. But, it's like, you hear things, it's like, oh, it's like, they call it NYCHA now. It's like, it was projects when I was growing up. I was like, yeah, I was an original NYCHA baby. It's like, this is just really, really wild to research and to look at. And then I, had to, the things I researched were more like bank loans and loans for people of color and things like that. And I was like, okay, you're trying to make a rom-com and a love story, and you're really getting dark now. And when you start to go into that, it's hard to come back out and make things lighter and funnier, like that like you need to do. So it was it was tough, the research. And it wasn't so much the neighborhood that I had to research so much, a little bit of the architecture, but it was just sort of the gentrification, the history of that, things that were there in my mind that were no longer there, that I had to sort of fix, that were just there when I first thought of the book a couple of years ago, that weren't there anymore. It was just like,
yeah.
Hurtful. And, and now on, this will probably be a question later, but it's a series. And suddenly now we have COVID. And these things are going to change. Some things are going to change because I write contemporary, and I just the way I work, I like to keep things very realistic. Things are going to change going forward. Yeah.
Don't know.
It's going to be a whole new world in this strong knit world. Yeah.
Yes. And we will get to that, later. But
yeah.
We will.
But,
I found too, like, that's one of the cool things about New York City is that it just makes the stakes overall that much harder and find love. And one of the things that I'm going to bring up a review that Marsden of Smart Bitches Trashy Books wrote about love lettering. And she said, there's a tragic irony in that both protagonists are lonely in a city of over 8 million residents. And it's just so heartrending. But it's also something that, like, you see, like, Faye, like, putting together her, like, instant ramen and updressing it, like, and having, like, no furniture apartment. You see, like, Robin, like, it's a sad, like, it's sad, but also, like, when she was, like, put together, like, champagne and, like, chocolates and, like, all this stuff from, like, the pharmacy, and was like, I'm gonna just eat that, and I, like, do you feel that, like, that the city plays a role in that, or in sometimes, or because it could be both very, like, sometimes it can be very close but also very alienating.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, it's really funny because in a lot of ways, the city is like the biggest small town ever. Because you do end up, knowing a lot of people in your area, and also, trying to keep that part of yourself away from everybody knowing it. I'm not putting this very well, but it's really funny how it can be like an intensely huge and overwhelming place, and also a microscope and really tiny, and you can know people from seeing them every single day on, like, walking your dog, or else you always know people in your playground or in the park, that jogger who always runs with khakis instead of, like, a pair of shorts, that guy. You always know certain people. And sometimes it's really great to see those people. Sometimes it gives you such a great comfort, and then sometimes you realize that they're absolute strangers too. You never know that person's name. So it's so extreme in a lot of ways, and that's really a condition under which, you can have these really exciting stories where people do suddenly brush up against each other and learn something about each other. And then, and also you do get that intense loneliness at the same time.
Yeah, I think when I wrote love lettering, I knew that I wanted to write about a person in the city who felt lonely, in part because she had a friendship that was falling apart. So it isn't even that she doesn't know anybody else in the city. She does. She has friends and connections in the city, but the person that she kind of came to the city with and is closest to and lives with, that friendship is falling apart. And so the sort of intensity of her loneliness is so extreme. And I think that, friends of mine that live in New York, but also folks that live in cities in general, when you live with friends and you're close to friends that way, that experience can be really isolating when things aren't working out. And so I wanted to write about that loneliness in particular. And then the hero of this book, Reed, is just a person who does not feel at home in New York. It's a place that feels sort of loud and confusing to him. He's not super happy about his work. And so he feels lonely in that way too. And I think that when you are maybe in a place where you don't know it as well, your feelings of loneliness are intensified because it feels like everybody else gets it and you don't. And I think that's really true of the hero in this book. The good thing is he eventually does get it. So it's a happy ending for him in New York too. So.
Yeah, especially because interestingly enough, Reed doesn't really want to particularly stay in New York. And he's not whiny about it. He's not like one of those characters who's about to like pen like why I left my New York essay. Like can't, take it anymore. But he's
Right.
also unhappy.
Yeah.
At the start.
Yeah.
So on that really happy note, I do have some fun questions. One is, what was one of your favorite New York City based date scenes in any of your novels? There was, I was wondering if anything jumped to mind.
I'm like,
I'm trying to, I feel like I can't even remember what I've written in any book right now.
I'm so bad at putting my I'm the worst at putting my characters out on dates. But I'll say my novel, it's my Kensington novel, Insert Groom Here. My heroine had to find a groom in a certain amount of time because she was dumped on live TV. She was dumped on live TV, so she had to find a groom in a certain amount of time to have a live wedding on live TV. So she had to do a whole series of dates, and all the dates were in and around New York. So there were a lot of funny dates, and one of my favorite scenes in dates was a film date on the boats I'm rowing. So if you can't see me, I'm rowing right now. I'll make it higher. On the rowboats in Central Park.
Yeah, those are great.
It was a whole hot mess, and she was with this horrible guy who thought he was the coolest in the whole world, and he was afraid of the bugs and tipped over the boat, and it was a whole big old mess. So that was a favorite date.
That water.
Yeah. Oh, and I wrote an aerial, sort of one of those aerial yoga date. That was a fun one that I wrote. In that same book. That's I don't know if I wrote any other date scenes in books. I don't write a lot of date scenes, but that one had a lot of date scenes around New York. So
I always end up going to Coney Island because
I was romantic.
Because Coney Island is just so weird. It is being super gentrified right now, obviously.
It's so expensive now too, but it's
there are some restaurants and like they put clubs on the boardwalk and there's like bouncers in front, and I'm like, Coney Island is for the people who live there, and the dude with the boombox on the back of his bicycle blasting Mark Anthony and with his Puerto Rican flag, like that's who Coney Island is for. Like, get out of here. But no, so I had a date on my main character. She's from New York. She's Latina, and she's taking her trash beautiful Boston trash, I should say, date male stripper to Coney Island, and they definitely get frisky on the Wonder Wheel. And I feel like I definitely didn't realize how many people don't know that the carts of the Wonder Wheel are enclosed. So you're in like your own little box. And if
you get one of those carts that go like this, the
swinging ones, like those are fun.
Yes,
and so like I always try so hard to just take my characters to Coney Island, but I always try to make it new again. So that would be my favorite one.
Can I interject my favorite? Well, not my favorite, just one of my million
yeah.
stories, because Coney Island is my mother's favorite place in the world. Like my mother just will not grow up about Coney Island. Like she will go there in a minute. Mm-hmm. So like my mother went to Coney Island like 2 weeks ago. COVID, forget it, doesn't matter, Coney Island. So I called my daughter up who lives in the city with my mother because she works in the city. So I'm like, oh, what are you guys doing today? Are you just so tired of lockdown? She's like, oh, me, grandma and the dog went to Coney Island. I was like, it's the corona. How you going to Coney Island? She's like, oh, we put on masks. We got in the car. We threw the dog in. We drove out to Nathan's.
Nice.
Got our hot dogs. Got back in the car. Got our hot dogs. Drove back home.
I want a corn dog so much.
Because this is how much my mother. Hot dogs don't taste the same if they're not on Nathan's.
The
on
food
Coney
and
Island.
everything. There's just something really special about that place, and it is so romantic. And that scene has romance and something. I will say now that I could say that, like in this panel, editing that scene was one of the most challenging in my life as an editor. The action on the Wonder Wheel, and at one point I'm sitting in front of my computer with the manuscript, and I'm miming the Wonder Wheel. Like, at what point are they on the wheel? No, this needs to go this way.
Look at what you
now
did, right?
The top of the cart. Yes, so that was really fun. So I also wanted to ask, for those of you who have written more small town or rural romances, are there any like differences like that you found in doing that? Like, what has stayed different and what essentially has remained the same?
You're like, point to somebody.
Let's go to Kate.
We're gonna do it. Quanah /KM Jackson, can you speak to writing small town?
Okay. Well, I'll say what's different is the location, and it's a small town. I sort of cheated, which you know that I sort of cheated because I always have to bring it back to New York, and I took my New York characters and put them in a small town in my Sugar Lake series. My books are As Good as This First Time and Too Sweet to Be Good. So I took sisters from New York and put them in a small town setting, sort of like Doc Hollywood. I always go back to movies. Remember that movie Doc Hollywood? And it's sort of like a fish out of water kind of story. And put them in a small town where they have family in the South and they help run this bakery. So it's like you've got New Yorkers in a small town. And I didn't find it particularly difficult. Just I feel like my writing, even though I'm writing in New York, I write New York as if it's a small town, just like everyone has said here on the panel, because New York to me is made up of a lot of little small towns. You know, my family, my grandmother would always say we live in the village of Harlem, you know, so it's like we have these small villages. You've got Flushing, you've got Harlem, you've got Laurelton, you've got the South Bronx, you've got the North Bronx, you know. Then you've got Lower Westchester, you know, and each little thing has its own charm, its own personality, you know. And when you venture out, you feel like you might even be in the 5 boroughs, but you change boroughs, you're in a whole nother town. It's very different. So I don't think the writing, when you go to small town, it depends on the writer, of course. You've got to change, your characters change, your settings may change, but depending on how you write it, for me, I feel like I'm a small town writer writing in the big city. But it's just, you know, I should write that down. Remind me that I said that because maybe it was good. I'll forget it.
Beautiful.
But it's not very different for me.
No, and that's the thing, Ruby. I believe you've spoken about that. There is still a sense of community, no matter what.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
New Yorkers have a strong sense.
New York
of
is very
strong.
You know, we have our in jokes. We have our neighborhood things. We have, like, all of my books have been set around really, like, maybe even just like 2-block areas in a lot of ways. You know, because those are the people that sometimes you really get to know really well. And I mean, that's like a little town right there, that 2-block strip. You can go over into just, you know, a few blocks west, and then suddenly you're in a different place in New York City.
For sure.
People are, you know, the stores are completely different. What is this world? The colors are different. Yeah, it's really strange and wonderful, and that's why also it's such a great place to explore, because you are just moving you're just walking through the city and suddenly it's a completely different geography. I lived, for instance, down in the West Village for a while, and then I moved uptown, and I was like, wow, it's really hilly up here. I thought that New York was a flat place. And that's just even like a really small example. I didn't move that far. I stayed in the same borough. It was a different place. So, it's really a wonderful thing. And I think a lot of people, when they come to visit, for instance, they think, oh, it's just loud and big. And it's really so many different things in a lot of ways.
Yes. And on that beautiful note, thank you again for all of these questions and answering them so beautifully and sharing your words with us. Now we have some questions the audience gave us previously on social media. So I would like to ask, what are you currently working on? And I will start with Kate, but please feel free to just boom, go ahead.
Well, I'm working on another standalone romance. This one is pretty different from Love Lettering, set in a different city. And I think the blurb will be out for it soon. But what I would say is that it is a tribute to one of my favorite pieces of literature. And I think that's probably all I can say about it right now.
I love mysteries. Quanah?
I am working on the second book in the Strong Brothers series, so the second in the knitting series. So I'm excited about that. We've got another brother coming up. So he is, well, it's been announced it's the firefighter brother. So yeah. So you're like, yes, thank you for saying that. Yes, everybody's guessing which brother will be next.
Honestly, I was just listening to like each description. I'm just like, yes, hello.
I love them all. I'm very excited about him. So I'm thrilled to be working on him next. And then after that, I've got my Keanu Reeves rom-com coming up. So exciting things happening next year. Yeah.
I am so excited for that one too. Ruby, what's up next? Or is it still a secret?
Well, I do get really superstitious about these things because I feel like if I say a lot about it, it will turn out to be completely different or else I'll not do it. However, I will say I am working on something about a washed up Taiwanese pop star and a scientist.
Nice.
I want it.
See, Also, if you could please mention what new collection will be coming out very soon, Ruby, from published works that you speak a little bit more
on. Let's see. So the Uptown collection is out on Monday. Oh wait, not Monday. It will have been out on May 26th, and in ebook form, and the paperback will be out on June 30th, and it has Playing House, by book about a fake relationship between two people who end up looking at houses all over Harlem. Open House, which is about a fight over a community garden, and House Rules, which is about New Yorkers who ex-wife and ex-husband who end up living together again because the rent in New York City is too high. So those will form the Uptown collection. They've all been previously published, and but they're going to get a snazzy cover with an asshole cat on the cover. This is so great. I'm so happy about this. And I'm sorry, I can't hear that. So I'm really excited about that. And I just also had an anthology come out with Emma Berry, and I'm going to forget everybody's name. This is terrible. Olivia Dade, Adriana Herrera, and Kat Sebastian, called He's Come Undone. And it's about starchy heroes who get unstarched by love.
Is it my
See what you got.
Oh, yeah. I'm sort of taking a break from YA and romance right now. But I'm working on the second and final book of my latest series, Incendiary, which right here. And book 2 is just a straight up enemies to lovers, fake marriage fantasy novel. It is YA, but it's like older YA. And so the sequel is just like 300 pages of them trying to fall in love with each other. And after that, I'm going to be, as Zoey Castile, I'm going to be in the Best Women's Erotica Volume 6. I'm pretty sure it's Volume 6, which comes out December 8th, 2020. So that's going to be fun. I think the theme was adventure. And so I have a girl who's backpacking through Scotland, which is what I did last year.
Oh, nice.
Oh my gosh, it's so awesome. I'm thrilled for all of these projects and I will buy them all. I think that's just the truth. I love losing money to good books. So I have one other question. I had no idea that the writer wrote romance under a pseudonym. What inspired you to write under a pen name, and why do you think writers choose to publish this way? And if any other authors would like to chime in as well, because this is also a romance thing that happens a lot.
So I chose to write under a pen name because I needed, just for contract reasons, in order to clear up, so that in order for me to write the Happy Ending series under Zoey Castile, I just needed a fresh start with a pen name, and that way my contract, I could not be like, oh, you're not allowed to write this book right now. So it's just a legal way of tricking people. Not tricking people, I shouldn't say that, but
but I definitely worry that a young reader would just happily click their way to a lot of abs, and I just would like them to wait until it's time for abs. I
think that they'll find it regardless. It wasn't really that. It was more like contract. It was more contract reasons. I think that the reason why people would want to write under a pen name is more because of the stigma. A lot of professional women might not want their coworkers or family to find them. But also I think for women of color, it's sexual racism. They might not want to read a book by X whatever because they're like, it might not be for me. And that's sexual racism is a real thing in our industry. And I think that's
much so.
Yeah. And so I think that that's why people change their name to Susie something. I don't know, not to be disparaging, but if I wrote romance under Zoraida Cordova, I think that would also look very different.
That's true.
Yeah, I think it would too. And I would like to read that too. I also would like to ask this last question from the audience. Who are your favorite romance writers? And of course, to be fair to the person who asked that question, you can just pick the one recent read, because otherwise we would be here for another 40-something minutes. So
there's no enough time for that question on this hour. In this hour.
No.
It's like everybody on the panel, the whole panel first, right? Or the faves. I'll go first. Can I go first? You just want to say one? You want to say one? That's not fair. One's not.
That's not fair. You can say.
I know.
That's not fair at all. That's just how it is when you get answers.
Say them really fast. Say a lot, but really fast.
I'm just gonna say a bunch of names, and then it's add 35 more names to it. Okay, I'm gonna say Farrah Rashan. Everybody pre-order The Boyfriend Project because it's my top book this year, and I'm telling people pre-order it. By the time pre-order it, and so that you can talk about it the first week it's out in June. So just listen to me and do what I say. Beverly Jenkins, because she is the queen, and that's it. Okay, Sharice Hodges, Sonali Dev, Piper Hughley, Alyssa Cole, and somebody take over. There's a million more people on my list. Now go Zoraida.
I love Alexis Daria is a darling. Adriana Herrera. And one of my absolute top favorites is Sierra Simone. I love her writing so much and the way she deconstructs kink and really tough subjects, and she really, really develops it on the page so that you unpack it and it's sensual and beautiful and poetic. It's just everything.
You've turned me into a Sierra Simone. That's you and Sarah McLean's like
Yep.
influence.
And Sarah McLean. I love Sarah McLean.
Yes.
You know, sometimes you just forget. You're just like, perfect. What else do I need? But Sarah. All right, Z, why don't you tag the next author so I don't have to?
Oh, I mean, this is like really hard. Actually, a favorite of mine is on this panel, and that's Ruby. I think Ruby is really brilliant. And I'll say the name of a writer I've been rereading a lot. I don't know if any of you have been rereading a lot in quarantine. But I've been really needing to read things that I know and love. And so one of mine is Sherry Thomas, and I don't think anybody in the business writes like Sherry Thomas. So she is a fave, especially for comfort rereading.
And that's definitely what we need right now.
Yeah, Ruby, it's to you.
One of my favorites recently has been Mia Sosa's The Worst Best Man.
Yeah.
I could not put it down. It is hilarious. And it's just, it's so good. Rebecca Weatherspoon's A Cowboy to Remember was so fun. Also,
So sexy.
So sexy. And
Jessie, when is Jessie's book? I've got to have it.
Gotta have it. I mean, and she does that whole, speaking of small town, she does a New York to a small town story there, and I thought she just did that so well, and so that was really fun. And also, there's amnesia. I love that. And also I love Jeannie Lynn. I've been rereading her over the last month because I just want to be in a different world, and there is the Tang Dynasty China is a pretty different world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a lot of rereading.
And on that beautiful note, thank you again, all of you, Kate, Quanah, Ruby, Z. Thank you all of you for sharing your time with this panel, with Bronx Book Festival Year 3. You can't stop us. You won't stop us. We're online. And I want to thank all of you watching. Please, thank you for supporting the Bronx Book Festival. This is what we're doing, and what Teresia's mission, and all the incredible committees, volunteers, and cheerleaders, and Doris and Tanisha working behind the scenes. Thank you so much for all the planning that you've done to assemble us all here today on the internet. I'm wishing you all the air hugs, and I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your everything.
Bye. Thank you so much. Buy our books.
Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.